Hi, I'm Brian Dickinson, and I want to show you how to modify any UVM report using a report catcher. So here's an example of a UVM report. It has a severity, it has an ID, it has a message, and it has a verbosity setting. So why may I want to modify reports like this in my simulation? Well, I may want to change some of the report characteristics. Perhaps I want to promote the severity of a particular message from info to warning during debug to give me greater visibility of the message. Perhaps I want to hide some reports from certain parts of the hierarchy or reports with certain characteristics or certain identifiers. Maybe I have a multitude of components which are not using the report characteristics in a consistent manner. They're not consistent in their use of severity or ID, and I want to standardize all these reports from my multiple components. Or maybe I want to modify the behavior of a standard UVM report generated from the UVM library. I'm going to show an example of handling a randomization failure message in a couple of slides' time. So how can I use a catcher to modify my reports? Well, when you raise a report, it's sent to a report handler for processing and for printing. And what we can do is we can insert a catcher in between the report and the handler. This intercepts the report and can do one of two things. It can either modify the report and then issue the throw action, which passes the report onto the handler to be processed, or we can issue the catch action that basically throws the report away, doesn't pass it onto the handler, and suppresses the report. So what can we change using a report handler? Well, we can change the basic arguments of the report. We can change the severity, the ID, or the message string. We can change the action which is executed when a report is printed. We can change whether it's sent to a file with the log action, whether it's counted, or whether the report causes the simulation to stop or just to exit completely. We can make some changes to verbosity, although we need to be careful because we're using the macro form here to raise our report. The macro will check the current verbosity threshold. If the report is greater than the threshold, then we will not send the report to the handler, so it can't be intercepted by the capture and modified. So we can make limited changes to verbosity. We could suppress the report entirely, as we showed, by throwing it away, by issuing the catch action, and then we can apply these changes either to every class in my hierarchy, to individual components, or just certain parts of my test bench hierarchy. And I can apply these changes conditionally. So if I find a report with a certain ID and a certain severity, then I can make changes to the message of that report. So let's show you an example. So the top here is the report which is issued when I get a randomization failure due to a constraint violation with a tick UVM do with action in a sequence. So this is a report issued by the UVM library itself. What I want to do is I want to change some of the characteristics of this message. So it has a severity of warning and an ID of RND FLD, and I want to promote the severity of this report to be an error. So here's my catcher to do this. So I extend my catcher from the UVM underscore report underscore catcher class. It has a standard data constructor with a single name argument, and I define my catcher by defining the implementation of the catch method. And here I use get methods to check if the report has an ID of RND FLD and whether severity is UVM warning, and if both those conditions are true, I use a set severity method to change the severity of the message to UVM underscore error. Then I'm going to return the throw action here because I want to pass the message onto the handler for further processing. So now when I apply this RND catcher report catcher, I expect the message now to be modified, and I expect the message issued by the UVM library on the randomization failure to now have a severity of UVM underscore error. Let's show another example. So again, this top message is output from the UVM library. This is an output of the check config usage method, which reports mismatched configuration settings in my simulation. So it has an ID of CFGNRD. And I want to use a report catcher again to change some of the characteristics of this standard report. So here's my config catcher, report capture, and in the catch method here, I'll check the report ID, and if the report ID is CFGNRD, then I'm going to modify the report message by adding the string configuration error in front of it, and I'm going to change the severity to UVM_error. So now when my message is intercepted by the catcher, it's going to return the following value. It's going to return an error message with the configuration error string prepended to the front of its existing message. So once I apply this configuration capture, it's going to modify the message and I'm going to get the output I need. So I need to apply the catcher in order to use this. And if you don't apply the catcher, then you don't get any interception of the messages and you don't get any modifications. So you must apply the catcher. So we apply the catcher first by creating a catcher instance here. So this is the instance catcher of my catcher class, and then I use add methods in order to apply the catcher. Now these add are static methods which are called off the UVM report CB class, where CB stands for callback. So my first one here, in the appropriate phased method, I can add the catcher globally. So the first argument is null. So this says that my catcher instance is applied to all the components inside of my simulation. In the second example here, I'm specifying a particular hierarchy. So here I'm saying any part of the hierarchy which matches the path name tb.uvc1 will have a catcher applied just to that hierarchy. And I can also use a different add option, add by name, and this allows me to specify the hierarchical path using a string, and this allows me to use wildcards in the hierarchical path to make the path a little easier to write. Now if you use the add by name option, then you have a third argument that you must pass into the method, and this third argument here is the context, and this is the context from which the string path name is resolved. So I'm passing in a context of null, which means the path name is resolved right from the top of the hierarchy of my UVM test bench. There are other options, and again you can check the documentation for the full options on both applying the capture and also constructing the capture.